just been returned?
Well, we mourn for those who had been dead and for those who had been killed by Russians, and we pray for their families. And the thing is that we urge Russia to execute a prisoner swap, but Russia is not eager to stick to the international obligations. They actually don't care about any international law. They believe that the only international law they can stick to is the law of the force or the law of strength.
Despite that, these prisoner exchanges have been the only concrete outcome from the last set of direct talks between the two sides in Turkey. President Zelensky has said that further talks are pointless without President Putin's direct involvement. Is that also your assessment?
I have different perspectives. So first of all, Putin doesn't want peace, and it's crystal clear. So he's dragging his feet. So he wants to outcheat, to outplay the Western world, Ukraine, and he actually wants to conquer Ukraine and then to move further and actually to try to attack the European Union. So I believe what is needed right now is not Putin at the negotiating table. We need to have President Trump back on track and the US administration. As of now, the U.S. administration is reluctant to impose an additional sanctions, and there is no clear-cut signs that the U.S. administration is ready to provide any kind of additional military support for Ukraine. And that's what is needed. And you feel just indicated about the air defense system in Ukraine. I want to be very clear. It is dwindling. So we are running low on our stockpiles. Have you seen what's happened in the last few days? Russians even started to hit the cathedral. This is the biggest, I would say, iconic church of Ukraine in Kiev. So they conduct combined aerial attacks. Ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones. So we urgently need an additional air defense system. And I'm very upset with the US decision to redirect 20,000 missiles that have been already directed for Ukraine support to another places.
Right. Okay. So Ukraine's ability to defend itself dwindling. We have a United States that seems less and less inclined to take an active role in this fight. How then do you change the mind of President Donald Trump?
Well, I believe that there is a majority in the U.S. House and in the U.S. Congress. Look, the bill that has been introduced by Lindsey Graham actually co-sponsored by 82 senators in the U.S. Senate. So it is a bipartisan decision to impose an additional severe and harsh sanctions on those who purchase Russian oil. So the White House and the Oval Office is undecided in terms whether to support the bill or to reject the bill. But the thing is that there is a political will inside the U.S. political establishment to help Ukraine. Look at the polls. Americans, more than 60% of Americans still support Ukraine. So it plays directly into the hands of Trump. If he wants to retain the power, if he wants to win midterms, which are expected to be in a year and a half, so it's in his interests, in his political interests, to support Ukraine. And the fact is that supporting Ukraine, he actually supports his national security interests. Okay. That's the Ukrainian military who demolished Russian land forces. So I still believe that we can have Americans back on track.
Okay.
At least it's a wishful thinking.
So you believe, support in Congress, but you have a president who is less and less interested. We all saw that confrontation between the president of the United States and the president of your country. Is President Zelensky helping or hurting Ukraine's relationship with the US presided over by Donald Trump?
You know, he is doing a good job. And the German chancellor did a good job. So my take is that my president is walking the tightrope. So on the one hand, he's not allowed to criticize the US president. On the other hand, he managed to mitigate the tension, because you mentioned the dressing down in the Oval Office. But in my humble opinion, let's bet a debate over an amazing and iconic picture in the St. Peter's Cathedral in Vatican. So at this very meeting, that's what I know for sure, they got along with President Trump. This is the question for how long they got along. But at least the tensions have been mitigated.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the fact that those missiles appear to have been diverted from your country to Israel. How do you change that decision? How do you change the perception that the Middle East and Israel is now a much greater priority in the president's estimation than the war that is currently raging in your country? How do you do that?
Well, let me put it this way. I do believe that you remember that President Trump said a number of times that what happened with Afghanistan withdrawal was a disaster. So my gut feeling is that Trump doesn't want to have another Afghanistan on his watch. And this would be tenfold harder for Trump to survive this kind of situation. It is worse than Afghanistan in case if the US administration turns its back on Ukraine. So this would be a political disaster personally for President Trump. This would have a dramatic ramification for the entire US foreign policy and for the US security and for NATO. And this would be a strain on, not just a blood strain, on the legacy of the US president.
OK, and we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Former Prime Minister of Ukraine, Arseniy Yatsenyuk. Thank you. Now to Poland.